Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jeannie, and Sassy Mouth and Marla Kris did another collaboration. This time they created the Knockin Boots Collection, and wait till you see how gorgeous these colors are. I am so excited to share this with you. The collection is now available as of this past Friday, so make sure you snag it because trust me, you won't regret it. Seriously, look at how gorgeous this collection is. So they're all blue grays, and they just give me really cozy winter vibes, and I am here for it. And in true fashion, I couldn't decide what color to use, so we're going to do a bit of a tonal mani. And I did receive a sample of her Clearly Uninterested, which is her clear dip powder in a previous order, so I'll be using that as well. I like to dip my thumb last, so I'm going to move Pearl Necklace out of the way to not confuse myself. And then the liquids I'll be using today are Sundara Nails Odorless Dip Liquids. So I picked them up in a previous sale that they had just to try out. I'm typically not one that gets dip flu. Typically when I get sick from dip liquids, it's from overexposure. So I've done a lot of swatching and I've been exposed to those chemicals for a long time. That's when I'll start getting a reaction. But I don't love the smell of dip liquids, so I'm still on the lookout for like a really great odorless that I could just use every day without having to think about it. So I figured I'd give these a try. The previous ones I've used are like ultra slow drying to the point of I honestly trashed them because they were I'm just too impatient for that, and they were taking too long to dry. But I have heard the Sundara dip liquids are a little bit, I mean, they're still slow drying, but they're faster drying than some of the other ones I've tried. So we'll see how these work out for my mani. I will say they are truly odorless, which I appreciate, and I actually really like the way the dip base applies. So it's a thinner liquid, but it didn't flood my cuticles at all. I even kind of liked the brush, even though it's like a little bit on the stiffer side. I don't know, it just didn't have any issues with it, and I really enjoyed using the dip base. And I will say that, you know, I'm going to do, even though I typically always do one color at a time from start to finish, I'm going to go ahead and move on and do my one dip of all 5 fingers before I dust off, just because I know odorless dip liquids are notorious for being slower drying. And I'm being messy here as you see me spill dip powder all over the place. So I'm going to go ahead and do my one dip per nail before I try to dust off, just to see about the speed of the dip base and how quickly or how slowly it dries. So I'm just going to be doing my normal dipping process. So I'm going to be doing 2 dips of the color, and then I will cap and clear. But one thing I wanted to mention, which I'm not sure if you can tell really well in the video, but these colors have the most gorgeous shimmer to them. Oh, and here I'm dipping in my nail a second time just to absorb some of that excess dip base. And then I'm just moving on to my next color. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to do all 5 fingers one dip before I go in with my second dip, which I typically don't like to do because I have a bad habit of confusing myself and dipping in the wrong color. But I want to make sure I give my dip base enough time to dry. I don't want to be too impatient and ruin my mani by trying to dust off too soon and ruining that layer of dip powder. I have used these liquids before for swatching, but I haven't used them on myself, so definitely was curious to see how they'd perform doing a mani on myself. So wait till you see this. I can't believe I did this. I was so upset. Look, I just dropped my entire jar. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I was determined not to lose my dip powder. and this is why I dip over a mat or something. So I take my little spoon and I'm just gonna scoop up as much as I can because I cannot lose this powder. I was so upset at myself for dropping the jar. I mean, I was being messy, so I was definitely having an off day when I was dipping. But, you know, I'm going to scoop up as much as I can. And you can see when I finish that I do get most of it. So I haven't lost a whole lot, but I still could not even believe that I dropped it. So once I think I've scooped up as much as I can, which you can see here is a pretty good amount, I've saved most of the jar. I'm just going to take my little desk vacuum, which is a total game changer. I love this thing. I'll leave it linked below down in the description. It'll clean up the rest of my mess and then I can just continue on with my dipping. Who else has done this before? Actually, this wasn't bad. I was upset at myself, but it wasn't bad. I've been swatching before and I've dumped an entire jar of dip powder in my lap, and that's a lot harder to save than on my nail mat. So I'm definitely thankful I was able to save it because it was just on my mat. So now that I've done one dip on all 5 fingers, I'm just feeling them to make sure that dip base is dry before I start dusting off, which the good news is they are dry, so it's safe to dust off. I'm still going to do it gently just in case, but I will say that I do believe these are quicker drying than some other ones that are out there, so these aren't going straight in the trash. I definitely will be using them again. Where I do run into the issues is with my clear, and I've run into this issue with all the odorless dip liquids I've had. So curious if you've had any issues with odorless dip liquids in your clear, and you'll see it once I get to capping my nails in clear. But for some reason, I feel like it's just a plain clear acrylic powder that doesn't absorb into the odorless dip liquids as well, and it takes so long to dry, whereas when I'm dipping into a colored acrylic, that it seems to absorb better. So I don't know if it's like the pigment or the mica or whatever is used in the dip powders that make it absorb into the odorless dip liquids, but the clear doesn't have it. I'm not sure what it is, but that's definitely one of the things that I'm noticing, at least for me, feels like is where I run into issues with odorless dip liquids. I may end up switching to encapsulating in gel base and gel top coat instead of using clear acrylic if I'm using my odorless dip liquids, just because of how long it takes to absorb. But I don't know, is it user error? Tell me if you've had any issues with that as well, or if there's any tips or tricks that I can try. And here's where I run into issues. So I'm capping all my nails in this clearly uninterested. So I applied a layer of dip base and then I'm pouring over my clear. And it took probably about 10 minutes for my dip base to dry. So I'm just checking it to make sure it's fully dry before I dust it off with a stiff scrub brush. But I will say the other odorless dip liquids that I've tried, no joke, took about 20-25 minutes to dry, which is why the liquids went in the trash can, because I just don't have that sort of patience. So these did dry quicker than the other odorless dip liquids, but still it took like 10 minutes. I couldn't believe how long it takes. And I didn't want to put more clear powder on because then you could run into some cloudiness or graininess. So I don't know if I just need to have a little more patience, but definitely would love tips and tricks. So I'm going to file and buff off camera. And so here's how we look. It was really simple, really quick and easy to file and buff. I did also pick up Sundara's gentle gels, so their gel base and gel top coat. I don't have their matte top coat, so I'm going to use my West Coast Dips matte top coat, which is a Hema free formula. And so I'm going to apply a layer of my gel base, cure for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to apply my matte top coat. Because I'm doing nail art, I do want to apply a matte top coat first. I haven't decided at this point whether they're going to stay matte or whether I want to make them glossy, but I definitely do want to start with a base of matte for my sweater nails. And here's how we look after I cure my matte top coat. Look at how good this matte top coat is from West Coast Dips. Like, it is truly matte. So I'm going to be using my iGel Beauty line art gels for some snowflakes, and we're going to sweater the snowflakes. So I think I'm going to use the blue, the silver, and the white for my snowflakes. So I'm going to be using dotting tools for my snowflakes as well as my Painted Desert 5mm line art brush. Look at how thin this brush is. I love using it for really fine nail art. I think it is perfect for that. They have really great gel art brushes. I would highly recommend them. So I'm just taking a bit of that blue liner and putting it on my palette. And then I'm just choosing which dotting tool I want to use. I think I want to use like a little bit of a bigger dot. So that's just kind of what I'm looking at there to find the size that I need. So once I've got the size that I need, I'm just going to gently dip that into the gel. And then I'm trying to find the center of my nail, which I am terrible at. So when I look at it from this angle, it looks fine. But when I look at it that angle, it doesn't look centered. So it takes me a couple tries to actually find the center. I don't know. I have the hardest time with that. I always think it's centered. And then when I look at it from a different angle, it's just not. So I don't know, maybe my head's crooked. I just have the hardest time. Does anyone else have a hard time finding like the center of your nail? And I think I'm lining it up with like the point of my almond, and it just, I don't know. So that's the great thing about gel, is as long as you don't cure it, you can just remove it with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. So I start again, and this time I think I get it. So I find the center of my nail where I'm going to put my biggest dot, and then I will go in with the other end of the dotting tool, which has a smaller point to it, and then I will make dots out kind of like a cross. So I'll make 2 dots above my center dot, and I'm just being really careful, trying to keep them in line. And then I'll do the same. I'll do 2 dots below my center dot. And I do like them to be like a little bit smaller than my center dot, just so it looks better, I feel like. So I'm just checking to make sure it's straight. And then I'll do the same to the right side and to the left side. I will make 2 dots out. And I know it looks so crazy, but trust me, these will make really pretty snowflakes. Or at least I think they make pretty snowflakes. So off to the right, I'm doing the same off to the left and just making sure I have enough gel on my dotting tool. And then I'll do one dot in between those two that I did on all 4 quadrants. This is kind of hard to explain, so hopefully you're able to follow what I'm doing. But I'm just creating those dots, and I know it doesn't look like anything at the moment. It just looks like a bunch of dots on my nail, but it'll start to make a little more sense. So once I've got all those dots in place, I'm going to take my liner brush, and starting at my center dot, I'm going to drag my brush starting at the center all the way up through those other 2 dots that I drew. And then same thing, starting at the center, I'm going to drag my brush down through to those 2 dots below, and then to the right and to the left I'll do the same. You always want to start at your center dot and then drag your brush through those other dots. And so that's why I was trying to make sure that my dots were as aligned up as possible, just so I could run my brush through them in as straight of a line as possible. And then I'll do the same for those little diagonal quadrant dots as well. So there's just this 1 dot there. So I'll drag my brush through those as well. And you can kind of see I'm anchoring my right hand to my left hand just to try to stay as steady as possible. So even if you don't have steady hands, make sure you're anchoring your hand, and that will help with your steadiness. So once I've got those all drawn out, you can see the snowflake now. This is totally optional. You don't have to do it, but I felt like I wanted my dots to be a little more defined, and they got a little off because one, they weren't straight in the first place, and 2, I think they got a little crooked because of running my liner brush through them. So I'm just taking that dotting tool and kind of defining them a little bit more. You don't have to do it, but that's just kind of what I wanted to do. But once I've got my gel in place, I'm going to pour my clear acrylic powder over it. So that's how you get a really great sweater nail. So you start with your base color and you have a matte top coat. You want to make sure your nails are matte. And then the gel you use for whatever design you want to do your sweater nail, the gel you use, you want it to match your base color. So because I have a blue nail, I did a blue gel to draw my snowflake. I poured the clear acrylic on top, and then I gave it a cure for 60 seconds. And then I can dust off the excess acrylic powder, and then that's what gives me my sweater nail. Now, as far as cleaning out your liner brush, you can take a little bit of gel top coat and run it through the gel top coat until it's clear again. And that's the safest way to clean out your gel brushes without drying them out. Because if you kind of clean them off with alcohol or acetone, it'll dry out the bristles. So it's better to run it through a little bit of clear top coat in order to clean out your color. So the next color I'm going in with my white, and I'll do the same thing on my ring finger, but I'll do 2 snowflakes. So I'm not going to talk you through this one. I'll just let you kind of watch it sped up a little bit. And just like that, the sweater nails are done. So I'm going to finish off my mani, rehydrating my cuticles with my Candy Skincare. This is her holiday scent, Holiday Fluff, which is just a really sweet, sugary scent. It smells really great. So I'm going to rub that all in. I decided to leave all my nails matte. I decided I didn't want a mixture of matte and glossy, so that's what I went with. And then I did get oil on my fingers, so I'm just taking a lint-free wipe and some rubbing alcohol, and I'm just wiping down my nails, and that will make my nails matte again after getting the oil on them. Alright, and here we go, the finished look. Sassy Mouth and Marla Kris collaboration Knockin Boots Collection. I mean, how gorgeous are these colors? Total winter vibes, and I absolutely am obsessed. I've been really loving using Sassy Mouth. If you haven't tried her, I would highly recommend it. And whenever her and Marla Kris get together, they do magic. So a huge thank you to both of them for sending me this collection to try out. I am in love with it. It is so gorgeous, and I can only imagine the fun they had naming these colors. I can just hear Marla Kris giggling while she's naming these colors. But anyway, other thoughts I have, Sundara Odorless Dip Liquids. I would highly recommend them. I think they're really great. They are slower drying because they're odorless, but they're not as slow as some of the other brands. I'm not super fond of the top coat. It's not as shiny as I like my dip top coats to be, but as far as the dip base and activator, really wonderful, and I would highly recommend them. So I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It lets me know to continue creating content like this, and it also helps YouTube recommend me to others. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload content every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, thank you for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.